Social expectation drowns us all inside. What you have should be what I want, 'cause what I have just ain't alright. The clothes I wear, the way I comb my hair, how I live, oh I don't care.
Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulihil kareem, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Alhamdulillah, subhanallahi wa bihamdihi, adada khalqihi wa rida nafsihi wa zinata arshihi wa midada kalimatih. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad النبي الأمي وعلى آله وسلم تسليما مولاي صل وسلم دائما أبدا على حبيبك خير الخلق كلهم سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي ربنا يسر ولا تعسر وتمم بالخير وبك نستعين يا فتاح اللهم اجعلنا دعاة إليك وإلى رسولك أما بعد. We ended on two topics here. That is two fossils within this bab of Ikhlas. The ilhamat, the inspirations which descend on their hearts, and the opening up of the doors of the pleasure of dua are adequate cash compensation for those who practice righteous deeds. This is a cash compensation. The ilhamat that descend on the hearts and the opening up of the doors of the pleasure of dua, ilhamat and enjoying dua are adequate cash compensation for those who practice righteous deeds. The bounties which are bestowed here in this world to those who practice virtue are the variety of inspirations which cascade into their hearts from the divine court at the time of enacting righteousness, and they enjoy it and they feel the ecstasy and the sweetness and they taste the halawat of iman. Dhaqa ta'am al-iman wajada bihinna halawat al-iman. They experience spiritual pleasure from these ilhamat, inspirations. Furthermore, vistas of the pleasure of dua are open in their hearts. The pleasure of dua, enjoy making dua. On the other hand, sometimes a person is deprived of dua as a result of the bond of love which Allah Ta'ala bestows to them. The bounties of the world, bounties of the dunya just recede and recede into oblivion. He who worships Allah for the attainment of thawab or for salvation from the azab has not discharged the haqq of Allah's attributes of excellence, splendor and grandeur. If the banda means servant, if the banda's purpose in rendering ibadah is the acquisition of Jannah, that's why he's doing it, and najat minan nar, to be saved from Jahannam, then inshallah he will achieve these goals, and it's halal, nothing is wrong with that. And he will achieve these goals. However, he has desired personal pleasure by way of ibadat. He thus remains trapped trapped in the web of the nafs, he has not discharged the rights of Allah's lofty attributes. The banda's attributes of excellence, his kamal, is that his ibadah should be purely for Allah's greatness and glory. Only for that. It is because Allah is Akbar. It is because Allah is mustahiq and worthy of all worship. Not because of the desire for Jannah. Not because of the fear of Jahannam. The duty of the slave is to serve, khidmat. Whether the master favors or rebuffs him, his duty is to serve, khidmat. This is the text, matan. When you are motivated by reward for any good act, then you will be questioned regarding sidq and ikhlas in the deed. You will then be uncertain regarding ikhlas. It is adequate for the uncertain one to be safe from divine punishment for his useless and defective deed. Commentary. If the intention underlying ibadah and virtuous deeds is the acquisition of compensation from Allah, he's doing it to get compensated by Allah. He's doing it for thawab, for reward. That's his niyat. Then Allah Ta'ala will point out to him that here what? Only a deed accomplished by ikhlas is rewardable. So if you are seeking reward, was that done with ikhlas or not? Because your intention is reward. It will be said, when you have practiced this deed for the sake of jaza, reward, it was not rendered solely for me. On the contrary, it was done for the sake of your nafs. So this is a very delicate, difficult situation here. Thus, the banda will be in doubt regarding the existence of ikhlas. If ikhlas was certain, he would not have rendered the deed in expectation of compensation. Wow. If ikhlas was really there, he would not have rendered the deed in expectation of jaza and compensation. For such a person, it will suffice that he is not apprehended by Allah Ta'ala. If I am not apprehended, mashallah, that is enough for me, if Allah doesn't take me to task. The hope of thawab and jaza is thus left aside. Text, matan, which is Itmamun Niyam, which is a translation of Tabweebul Hikam. You are not the actual demonstrator of your deeds. Therefore, do not expect reward for any of your acts. You are not the actual demonstrator of your deeds. Therefore, do not expect reward for any of your acts. An ample reward for your deeds is that they are accorded acceptance, qabul, and you are not apprehended for rendering them defectively. This is ample reward. That they are accorded acceptance, and you are not apprehended for rendering them defectively. How many times we render something defectively, but yet still Allah accepts it? It should be understood that Allah Ta'ala is the fa'il haqiqi. This is where we come to Aqidah. People like to speak about Aqidah in this age and time. Aqidah. Yes, indeed, Aqidah is important. But according to the Aqidah of Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah, our amal and our deeds are also makhluqa and created. So it should be understood by all that Allah Ta'ala is the real doer. He is the real doer. He is Al-Fa'ilul Haqiqi, the true doer and actor of all actions. This is the meaning of La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, because nothing operates except by the power of Allah. I can't speak except by the power of Allah. I can't perform salah, I can't walk, I can't talk, illa billah. Therefore, in ibadah, in worship, the banda's gaze should be on Allah. His gaze not should be upon his deeds, but his gaze should be upon Allah. And Allah has taken khidmat from me. He has allowed me to be obedient. He should understand that Allah Ta'ala has created the act for him. Wow. Makhluqa. Amal. Makhluqa. He should understand that Allah Ta'ala has created the act, and it is his favor and ihsan. Quran says, وَمَا تَوْفِيقِ إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ وَمَا تَوْفِيقِ إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ. Since the banda, the abd, is not the creator of his good deeds, yes, it comes through his limbs, but he wasn't empowered, he did not empower himself. Since the abd, the banda, is not the creator of his good deeds, it is highly improper for him to desire compensation. Very improper to desire reward for that now. Therefore, if he is in the pursuit of reward, if that is his game, objective, he is in the pursuit of reward and thawab, Ikhlas will be negated. It means Ikhlas is not there. Ikhlas will only be there when it is done because Allah is worthy of worship under all circumstances. He is Akbar. He is mustahiqqun lil ibadah. It is more than enough that the true master, Al-Mawla, accepts the deeds. This is more than enough, that he just accepts the deeds. Grants reward. Of course he grants reward. He will give reward. And does not punish. This is enough. That the true master, Al-Mawla, Al-Haqiqi, accepts the deeds. It is maqbool. He grants rewards and does not punish. In fact, the banda deserves to be apprehended. He deserves to be apprehended. Text. At the time of ta'ah, ta'ah is obedience. At the time of ta'ah, obedience and ibadah, you are more in need of divine kindness than when you are in need thereof at the time of sin and disobedience. And this is so deep. Because a person might ask himself, how? Why? It's a good thing a person is doing. Why is he more in need of Allah's kindness at that time? At the time of ta'ah, obedience, and ibadah, you are more in need of divine kindness than when you are in need thereof at the time of sin and disobedience. Commentary. The excellence and loftiness of the banda are in his awareness that the actual maqsood of all ibadah is only Allah Ta'ala. That is the kamal of the banda. The excellence and loftiness of the banda, the slave of Allah, are in his awareness that the actual maqsood, what is the actual purpose, matlub and maqsood of all ibadah, is nothing and only Allah, Allahu Ta'ala. That's all. That's the maqsood. La maqsooda illallah. This is the meaning, one of the meanings of La ilaha illallah. It means La maqsooda illallah. La maqsooda illallah. La matluba illallah. Thus, at all time, in all acts, his gaze is focused on Allah Ta'ala. At all time and in all acts, his gaze is focused on Allah, Allah Ta'ala, like a beggar soliciting food from a benefactor. Just picture in your minds a beggar soliciting food from a benefactor. His gaze is on the benefactor. His action, deed, and even his existence are completely out of his sight. He doesn't think about himself. He doesn't think about his action, his deed, and even his own existence are completely out of his sight. The beggar is only focused on his benefactor. So to the servant of Allah, his action out of sight. He doesn't even see his action, his deed, even his own existence are completely out of his sight, which is another meaning of La ilaha illallah. It means La mawjuda illallah. There's no existence except Allah. La mawjud. No one is present. There is no existence. Nothing is in wujud illallah except Allah. His reliance, his i'timad, his tawakkul, his trust is only on Allah Ta'ala. The heart derives solace from only Him, and the direction of the heart is only Him. Ala bi dhikrillah tatma'innul qulub. The heart derives solace, peace, tranquility, joy from only Him, and the direction of his heart, the qibla of his heart is only Him, Allah. That is the meaning of La ilaha illallah. When we do that zikr of La ilaha illallah, we must understand all these things are incorporated. There remains absolutely no trust on one's efforts and plans. Subhanallah. There remains absolutely no trust. There is no trust. There is no reliance on one's efforts and plans. I have no reliance and no trust on my effort. My effort, what is my effort? I have no reliance on my effort. I have no reliance on my plans. I have no reliance upon myself. The contemptibility and destruction of the banda, his halak, his destruction, are brought about, when he is destroyed? When he becomes contemptible, despicable in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The contemptibility and destruction and the halak of the banda. A'udhu billahi minash shaitan amantu billahi wa rusulihi. The contemptibility and the destruction of the banda are brought about when his attention turns to his nafs and he becomes pleased. He becomes pleased with his deeds. Then that is the road to decline. That's the road to destruction. This is his halak, and this is when he begins to fall. When his attention turns to his nafs, and he becomes pleased, very happy with his deeds, pleased with his deeds. Thus, he begins to value himself. I have done so much. Why? I feel so happy with my deed. You know, I read a whole Quran today. One Quran, I never thought I could have done that. I spent 1/3 of the night in Salat and I cried. So when Fajr Azan is called, he has that feeling of satisfaction inside of himself. Thus he begins to value himself and his eyes falls upon his deeds. When the banda develops this disposition, he is expelled from the divine court and he becomes accursed. And this chapter is so important. Once more again, the contemptibility and the destruction of the servant of Allah, the banda, are brought about when his gaze, when his attention turns to his self, to his nafs, and he becomes pleased with his amal and his actions. Thus he begins to value himself. Main kuch ho. When the banda develops this disposition and attitude, he is expelled from the divine court and he becomes accursed. That is why a person who sins, he sins and then he cries and says, "Oh my master, oh my Maula, I slip and I get up and I slip again and I get up. So many times I've sinned. I'm so weak. I'm sorry." Allah loves that sinner much more than a person who does so much of good deeds and then he looks at his deeds and becomes pleased with his deeds. And he gets pride in that. That is takabbur also. Now understand that when the servant sins, when he sins, he is in need of Allah's kindness, no doubt. He is in need of Allah's kindness. Ya Rahman, Ya Rahim, Ya Ghafoor, Ya Arhamar Rahimin, Ya Maula. For if he is denied divine kindness, Allah's punishment will overtake him. So when he is sinful, he is in need of divine kindness. And he recites all types of words. La ilaha illa anta subhanaka inni kuntu minadh dhalimin. Rabbi ighfir warham wa anta khairur rahimin. Oh Allah, I'm sorry. He therefore requests divine kindness. Ya Ra'uf, Ya Rahim. He requests divine kindness to avoid being apprehended and to secure pardon for his sins. But since ta'ah, obedience, and ibadah are in fact divine pleasure, this is really what? Divine pleasure. Ta'at, ibadat are in fact ridha-i ilahi, divine pleasure. Then the issue of kindness does not even arise. Kindness is required when an act is rendered in conflict with divine pleasure. That's when kindness is required, when it's in conflict with divine pleasure. Here, obedience, ibadat, is not in conflict with divine pleasure. Nevertheless, frequently, the opposite materializes. That is, the need of divine kindness at the time of ta'ah and obedience, the need of divine kindness from Allah at the time of obedience and ta'ah is greater than at the time of sin. It's greater, it's much more needed than even at the time of sin. This needs to be explained. The explanation of this is a paradox. It seems contradictory. The explanation of this paradoxical claim is as follows. This is how we understand it. It is the natural disposition of the mu'min to be raked by remorse. That's natural within him. To be raked by remorse after commission of a sin. Wow. He feels sad. He is grieved. It's natural. He becomes overwhelmed by regret, grief, and self-contempt. He hates himself. He dislikes himself. That's all natural. He despises and detests his own nafs. This is all natural. He gains greater humility. Greater humility. He becomes so humble. And he hastens to supplicate and to make dua for forgiveness in the divine court. Rabbi ighfir warham wa tajawaz amma ta'lam. Supplicating for divine forgiveness. For forgiveness in the divine court. In this pitiable state, his gaze is not on his effort and deed of tawbah. Wow. You think he's watching his tawbah and wow, I'm really making tawbah. His gaze is not on that. In this pitiable, pathetic state of his gaze, his focus is not on his effort, not at all. It is not on his deed of tawbah, not at all. The attitude of complete dependence on Allah's kindness becomes ingrained in his heart. That's all he cares about. That is his attitude. Complete, total dependence on Allah's kindness, His rahmat, His maghfirah. That becomes ingrained in his heart. He is fully aware that besides Allah's grace, mercy and kindness, there is no other refuge for him. Where can I go to? Where can I run to? La malja wa la manja minka illa ilayk ya Allah. No place to turn to, no refuge, no place of success. To whom can I go? Ya ahada man la ahada lahu. Ya sanada man la sanada lahu. In kata ar-raja'u illa minka, he supplicates. This attribute which he had subsequently developed is the objective. Wow. This is the objective which has to be cultivated. This type of attitude which he has subsequently developed is the objective which has to be cultivated. This attribute of absolute humility, total humility, the sinner, how humble he becomes. The attribute, the sifat, the quality of absolute humility is in fact the banda's excellence. This is the kamal of the servant, this quality of total, complete submission, surrender, dependence on Allah's forgiveness, His kindness, absolute tawadhu, humility is in fact the banda's excellence. But look at the other side of the coin so we could understand this. This is clear to everybody. But how is it when a man performs righteous acts? When a man is in ta'ah, when he's in obedience, when he's in ibadah, How come he is in greater need of this kindness from Allah? How come? On the other hand, sometimes after ta'ah, sometimes after obedience and ibadah, the servant, the banda's gaze, his gaze falls on his deeds, and that is a big, big, big mistake. Allahumma hafadhna min hadha. On the other hand, sometimes after ta'ah, after obedience and ibadah, worship, the banda, the abd of Allah, the servant's gaze falls on his deeds. He then becomes vain. He then becomes vain, considering himself an obedient servant. He considers himself an obedient servant. And he considers himself an abid, a pious worshipper. He feels that he has discharged Allah's rights. I have discharged Allah's rights. Ujub comes in, takabbur comes in. Hence, he believes that he deserves to be rewarded. That comes in inside of him. He believes that he deserves to be rewarded, and he expects reward. He expects compensation. Whether he says it or not, that is inside of him. In this hal, in this state, his gaze is on his effort, and he ceases to rely on Allah's grace and mercy. And this is the road to destruction. In this hal, in this state, his gaze is on his effort, and he ceases to rely on Allah's grace and mercy. Therefore, it will not be surprising if Allah's wrath settles on him. It will not be surprising. And he thus becomes the object of divine displeasure. Object of divine displeasure. Allah's wrath settles upon him. This is not surprising. Thus, on the occasion of this type of ta'ah, which leads to vanity, the banda stands in greater need of divine kindness than his need at the time of sinning. He's in need, greater need of kindness from Allah. That, oh Allah, it is you. You enabled me. You empowered me. Oh Allah, accept it. Oh Allah, taqabbal minna. It is from you. And he's in greater need of Allah's kindness than at the time of sinning. And never ever focus and watch on his deeds. Matan and text. Frequently, subtle and obscure riya, show, enters from an avenue which others cannot perceive. Commentary. Riya. We all understand riya. Riya is show, ostentation. Is to render an act of ibadah. To render an act of ibadah. Sunset is 5:54. It is to render an act of ibadah or some other virtuous deed with the motive of creating an impression on others so that they consider one a pious and a saintly person. That is riya. Creating an impression on others so that they consider one a pious and a saintly person. If a person commences an act of worship, example namaz, in the presence of people or in the absence of people who later arrive, and solely to create the impression of piety, the person adorns his namaz, discharging it beautifully, then this type of show will belong to the overt. It will belong to the overt kind of riya. It's open, it's not covert, it's overt, open. Yani riya zahiri. Everybody understands this type of riya. It is not covert, it is overt. Sometimes, but What puzzles a person is, how could a person show off and have riyah when he is in privacy? He may be in the dead of the night, 3:30 in the morning, doing tahajjud. Where is the riyah there? Sometimes a person renders an act in privacy. Nobody is around, in privacy. No one being present to see him. Notwithstanding this privacy, riyah, show, even then to enter his heart. This kind of riyah is extremely subtle and obscure. The sign of this riyah, the sign and the alamat of this riyah is, you know what, he's doing that there, but it is man's desire to be honored when he meets others. Later in the day, after Fajr Salat and thing, when he meets others, he expects now to be honored because of what he did that night. Man's desire to be honored when he meets others. That he be appointed to a position of prominence and leadership, and that others serve him. He expects that later on. So when he is honored, when that happens, and when he is honored, he becomes elated, happy. But if later on, after Fajr, people meet him, no special treatment, what's going on? When such honor is not forthcoming from the people, he is stung with surprise. What's happened? This attitude indicates that this person's efforts and deeds are motivated by the desire for name and fame and to gain service from people. It was never even done for Allah's sake, even though it was in privacy. Because what he expected now, that people after Fajr Salat, after Ishraq during the day, because he spent the whole night in Ibadah, there should be a change. People will honor him, he will get position, he will get this, he will get that. When such honor is not forthcoming from the people, he is stung with surprise. This attitude indicates that this person's efforts and his deeds are motivated not by love of Allah and fear of Allah, are motivated by the desire for name and fame and to gain service from people. But it was so subtle, so delicate, that it could not have been seen. We will do one last text here because Azan time is coming in. Your desire that people learn of your deeds and your batini states, your desire that people learn of your deeds, you want people to know of your deeds. That's a desire inside of your heart. They should know of your deeds, and they should know of your batini, internal spiritual states, is proof of the lack of truth in your worship. Truth in ubudiyat, truth in the state of worship, is the diversion of the gaze from all things besides Allah. This is the truth in ubudiyat, in the state of worship. Is the diversion of the gaze from everything, from Ghair Allah, from all things besides Allah. The attention of the banda and the servant should turn solely to Allah Ta'ala. If the banda possesses this attribute, he will be true when his gaze is focused upon Allah and away from Ghairullah. If he desires people to become informed of his pious acts, inside there's a craving inside of his heart. He desires people to become informed of his pious acts and his special spiritual conditions. He has some spiritual conditions, but he wants it to be known. And he adopts various methods for publicizing these. He adopts various methods for publicizing these. He should know that he is not true and he is not sincere. This very desire inside of him is proof for his insincerity and that he has no Ikhlas. We will continue next week, inshallah.
Social expectation drowns us all inside. What you have should be what I want, 'cause what I have just ain't alright. The clothes I wear, the way I comb my hair, how I live, oh I don't care. This is who I am, this is me. Nothing, everything, can't you see who I am? Just let me be, 'cause like it or not, but God loves me, who I am. He said, she said, they all